This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by MacPaw, the makers of CleanMyMac 10. Your Mac as good as new. Find out more and download your copy at macpaw.com/podcast. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we have a very special anniversary to celebrate this time, and to do it, we have Mr. Adam Engst of TidBITS. Adam, welcome.
Thank you, Chuck. And I have to say, I think 30th is the SSD anniversary. So I'm expecting SSDs from everybody.
Okay.
There's the paper anniversary and the silver anniversary. I want SSDs.
Okay.
I will admit, this is a personal little problem right now because the SSD in my iMac died. I think it died the day before the anniversary. Is that true? The day of? I'd have to look back. It was either the 15th or the 16th. So yeah, that was fun. I
didn't realize that there was a tech list of designations for anniversaries.
We've got to do this. Yeah. There's the iPhone case anniversary and the RAM anniversary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
The RAID anniversary and
you get that one late. you got to be in a relationship for a long time to get the RAID anniversary.
Well, so 30 years of TidBITS is, I know we talked about this a little earlier in the year, and we said, well, when the time comes, we'll talk about it more. And it just, what were you, 3 when you started TidBITS? Or
23, but yeah. No, 22, I guess, kind of by definition, because I'm 52 now. So yeah, 22. It boggles my mind. I guess time moves along so fast. But if I remember correctly, TidBITS started out as being distributed as HyperCard. Yes, we started in HyperCard format, and that lasted for 99 issues. After which we switched to structure enhanced text, CText. And that was a text-only format that was kind of the predecessor to Markdown, actually. Markdown, CText. Markdown was a superset of CText, put it that way. So everything that CText did, Markdown did, and then more. Saying that we continued in CText was true, but somewhat irrelevant. It kind of basically went away about 2 years ago when we switched to our current WordPress system. And our previous content management system, the TidBITS publishing system that Glenn Fleischman had written for us, one of the formats that was kicked out every week was CText. So it was basically plain text with some subtle markup that you wouldn't notice if you weren't thinking about it.
And I didn't realize. I knew you'd changed publishing systems. I didn't realize there had been that much of a change between that and moving to WordPress.
Yeah, no, WordPress was a big deal, and the problem is that writing your own content management system was something you did 10 years ago, or probably 12 or 15 years ago when we actually did it. I can't remember exactly. And WordPress existed, and other things existed at the time, but there were tons of them, and they were all bad. So, because what happened was everyone had a problem, and they said the only solution to my problem is I'm going to write my own content management system, and so everyone did. And then people said, "Oh, look, I wrote this great content management system. People are saying such nice things about it. I'm going to make it a commercial product or an open source product or whatever. It's going to be a product." But that didn't mean it was useful for anyone else. And so, because we actually had we never did it, but we had exactly the same experience with our content management system. So we had people who were writing for us and for Macworld at the same time. And they said, "Oh, wow, the TidBITS publishing system is so much better than whatever Macworld was using at the time." And, yeah, that's because ours does exactly what we want and nothing else. Whereas theirs, was an off-the-shelf product that they tried to customize and therefore did nothing well because it wasn't exactly designed for them. So when it came time to switch to something, we went with WordPress because it was so completely standard and so much support in plugins and things like that. Certainly has plenty of other issues. Don't get me wrong; it is not the best content management system in every way, but for something where I could be guaranteed of getting a developer in the future and all of that, it made a ton of sense. And then we put a load of work into the development so that, yes, it's WordPress behind the scenes, but the whole thing is completely and utterly customized for what we want out of it.
And that customization, I mean, we're going to go down a web publishing rat hole here for a second, but it is interesting what you're saying there, that even with WordPress, and as customizable as it can be, you really still need a developer that knows under the hood, to what's going on. Unless you just
question. It's not even a question.
Yeah, unless you're just going to take the absolute basic features. You have to have somebody.
In fact, I did both, actually. So when I started TCN, the TidBITS Content Network, which we do syndicated content for consultants and resellers and whatnot, I built that site myself in WordPress. And it was the first time I'd had any experience with WordPress. And, but some people I trusted said, oh, it's pretty good. And, and they've got great plugins and all that. And so, yeah, I was able to get something up and running. And it works. It does what I want. And I do not, for the life of me, understand how it's put together. That I can make it do what I want, but I don't know why. And it's not clean. It's funky. There's things I have to do that I don't like doing because I can't figure out how to get to this. And it's just, it's what happens when you're not an expert at this stuff and you don't write custom code. And so, I'm tremendously frustrated by this because, look, I wrote, one of the first books about the internet. I'm a smart guy. I should be able to do this. I can write HTML. I can code. What's the problem? Web development is a complete profession and specialization now. And there's even specializations within web development, whether you're a front-end person or a back-end person, or, you do content management systems, or you do custom code, or you do web design. Is so many professions that are necessary now. And so you just, the days of being able to spin up anything more than a simple site on your own are really pretty far gone. And for the simple sites, go with, Squarespace or Wix or one of those things, because they've taken a lot of the funkiness of WordPress and everything else, Drupal and Laravel and whatnot, out of the picture. They just give you the front end, and not going to be very flexible, but it's going to do what it does well.
Yeah, I'm having some experience with a commercial content management system that shall not be named, and it's like, who put this thing together? I mean, I'm not necessarily, I don't profess to be a content management guy, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I can work around this, but confusing puts it mildly. I mean, there are almost too many options, and they don't make a lot of sense, and they don't make sense from a publishing standpoint, let alone from a viewer standpoint.
Yeah, it's absolutely the case. And so the big thing I'm trying to, is get my developer to have time to, convert the TCN site to be like the TidBITS site underneath, because in fact, it's exactly the same concept of content where, articles are written and then collected together once a month instead of once a week, and, and sent out an email and, made available via RSS. And, so it's actually very much the same publishing structure. And, so everything we did for TidBITS will work, but it needs to be coded into that site. It's not just a matter of, you can't just apply a theme and suddenly it's there. It doesn't work that way. And, and this guy's good, but, he's busy. So it takes time.
He's busy because he's good.
He actually went and got a job not that long ago, which is like the, so now I'm on, when he has time. So I was glad that we finished the TidBITS site when we did, because that was well done in advance. But, now having major development work is really much harder to schedule even still.
See, I told you we were going to go down a web publishing rabbit hole.
Anytime you start, you're just like, argh.
Yeah.
And it will take 3 times as long and cost twice as much. Just so we're also clear on the other parts of the web development about rat hole.
Yes. If you're going to go that way, you probably need a developer. A budget, a developer and a budget, to make sure you know what you're getting into.
One creates the other. You can't have one without the other.
Well, and also, you better put some money aside each probably year, 2 years to have that site reviewed, revised, because unfortunately, WordPress as the underpinnings of it, they change things, they break things, and PHP upgrades come along, and that breaks things.
It's actually not even putting money aside. It's a constant maintenance budget. And it won't be that much, but it has to be, you have to have someone looking at it all the time, because you will rely on plugins and they are updated, and you have to upgrade to the new versions of WordPress that come out and all this kind of stuff. And it is just nonstop. And what you do need to put money away for, however, is that in 5 years, 10 years, whatever, you're going to want to do a whole new design. Or there's going to be something about the current content management system that you now hate, and whatever web developer you're talking to will know what the latest hotness is in web and content management systems, and they'll want to push you to that one because they love developing in it. And maybe that's appropriate, maybe it's not, but I'm just saying 5 to 10 years, guaranteed you're going to want to do it all over again. So save the pennies.
yeah, exactly. So I'm going to try to leverage part of that discussion. If you knew then what you know now, what changes would you have made along the way? Because you just finished saying that every 5 years or so you're going to want to revise your site or revise the process. Yeah. So as far as publishing TidBITS, what would you have done, that maybe you didn't do early on, or that you would have liked to have done that would have really helped you out now?
I don't want to sound self-congratulatory, but for the most part, we did things right. And I can't take full credit for that. That was a lot of the work done by Jeff Duncan and then Glenn Fleischman after that. And the reason I say that is one of the things that's true about TidBITS is that we've obviously been publishing for 30 years. We've been publishing on the web since 1996 or something like that. And that was just, putting up the issues. But we've had articles in a database for, must have been the late 90s. And those URLs all still work. So there are no tidbits.com URLs that we published that go to an article that break at this point in time. I mean, they're completely different. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was all db.tidbits.com initially because it was literally a FileMaker Pro database behind a web server. And it was just an archive. We didn't publish there first. We put stuff there afterwards so that it was searchable. But Jeff was always very good about making sure that every article had what he called a getBits ID number. And so those stayed consistent. And so we moved the system. We've moved the system 3 times. So we went from FileMaker to Web Crossing to the TidBITS publishing system to WordPress. So it's the 4th move, I think. But every time we just make sure the old URLs keep working. Like the web does this. It's redirects. It's not rocket science, but that seems to be massively unusual. How many articles, well, put it this way, you go read any of our articles from that time, all the links in them are broken except the ones to our site. So, that's one thing that, that I think we actually did really, really well. And so there was one inflection point that was really ugly, which was when we went from HyperCard to CText. In fact, my sister, who was, this was in 1992, so she's probably like 18, 19, something like that. No, she would have been 20 because she was born in 72. So she was 20 and she'd come to visit me. She was taking a semester off from college or something like that. And she volunteered to extract all the text out of our HyperCard stacks and put them into these text files. And, so that was the big piece of manual work that we needed to do to actually have good data. And that's partly what I'm saying is that if you think about your data structures ahead of time and you have good data and you have metadata, it's not always the prettiest thing in the world, but you can always move to something else. And that's kind of what we've done throughout.
Okay, so let me make sure. In my head, this is what I'm thinking, and it can't be right. I understand that. But if it used to be db.tidbits.com, And now you've, I mean, have you physically moved those articles to a new page holder? Is that how? Because otherwise you'd have to have that old thing still running.
No, there's basically, so db.tidbits.com is a domain name that now redirects to tidbits.com. So on the domain level, it all sees DB and then moves it to the appropriate server. And then the version of Apache and WordPress that are running know how to, between the two of them, know how to respond to those queries. So Apache says, yes, I respond to DB. I'm going to send it to WordPress, and I'm going to do this with the URL so that WordPress gets the GetBits ID, which we've sucked into a custom field associated with every post. And then, so it receives the WordPress sees the GetBits ID, says, that goes with this post, and I'm going to display that one. And it's got the full new URL, the modern, it's got the year in it and everything like that. And it's even proper for the old one. So it's like 1996/04/01. /file, title. It's a modern URL format, but we still have all those GetBits IDs. And so, again, not that I'm planning another move anytime soon, but if I did, there would be some way of moving all the database stuff, because WordPress is based on MySQL, moving all that data over to whatever the next system is, such that those old GetBits IDs are still there and still honored.
This edition of MacVoices is supported by MacPaw, the makers of CleanMyMac 10. Have you upgraded to macOS Catalina? Then you need CleanMyMac 10. There are almost certainly files left over from your previous system that don't need to be there. CleanMyMac 10 can help you find them, let you know what they are and where they are, and help you get rid of them. If you haven't upgraded to Catalina, you need CleanMyMac 10. It will help you optimize your Mac to run at its best, and when you're ready to upgrade, none of those old useless files will be transitioned over. In fact, whatever system your Mac is running, or whatever Mac you are using, CleanMyMac 10 will help you get it running at its best, and keep it running at its best. Get rid of those outdated cache files, logs, and old mail attachments. And don't worry, CleanMyMac 10 won't delete anything without you knowing about it and without your permission. Find out how it works by downloading your free trial of CleanMyMac 10 from macpaw.com/podcast. That's macpaw.com/podcast for your free trial of CleanMyMac 10. Give your Mac a performance upgrade with CleanMyMac 10 at macpaw.com/podcast. Thanks to MacPaw for their support of MacVoices. There's historical value in what you've created. And that's something that and I think that's something that a lot of sites have thrown out the window. And as to your point, that all those links that used to be there are gone.
And it's a crying shame, that the fact is that it's one thing if a company goes out of business. Sure, okay, maybe that's tough. But there's plenty of publications that are still in business that, they just switched to a new system and couldn't be bothered to keep all their URLs functioning. And I get it. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it's really not that hard either. I mean, at the worst case, everything has a very simple one-to-one redirect capability. I mean, you could simply build a honkin' big file that would be every imaginable URL on your old site redirecting to the new one. Again, not that hard. And you have to do some kinds of some more clever things. So, for instance, what we got for the first few months is we'd see these failures in Google search tools. Actually, it tells you what things break, and I'd look at them and go, oh, okay, so it's coming through, and I don't even know how one of these URLs got out there, but we'd put out a URL, and someone else would somehow use it such that it got variables attached to it, and those variables would mess things up. So I had to adjust our code so that it would strip the variables off appropriately, because our server didn't know what to do with them because they weren't our variables. We didn't have variables anyway. So, but those question marks, all the UTM stuff, all that nonsense. So,
right.
Things like that would confuse our system. And every now and then Google Search Tools still tells me about a bad URL. And I'm like, it's just a bad URL. It didn't work on the old site. It's not going to work on the new one. It doesn't go to anything. Some bozo made it up, basically, or, had a typo in it. There's nothing I can do to fix this bad link to my site somewhere.
Right. Wow, I've had no idea we were going to go in that direction. But this is the way our conversations usually go. Adam, at what point do you think that, looking back at 30 years, when did this this was going to become your career? I mean, because and if you said that with TidBITS number 4, I'll be shocked. But at some point, there had to be a bit of a realization that you'd created this thing that could sustain you, and people were interested and would
I think probably the point where that, at least I got a hint of that anyway, was when we started our sponsorship program. So TidBITS did the first advertising on the internet, bar none. And Google has yet to say thank you. I just noting. I mean, be nice. But no, that no one had done advertising before us, because the ARPANET was under the auspices of the National Science Foundation, which had an acceptable use policy which banned commercial use. It was never really clear what commercial use meant, and so we pushed the boundary a little bit with our sponsorship program. We based it on NPR and PBS, and that kind of models rather than the full-on Crazy Eddie ads. And we never got any pushback on it at all, to be honest. There was never a problem with that. But I think it was once it became clear that I actually could earn a living doing this. That's what, I mean, I certainly never anticipated it was going to go 30 years, but I'm not a big future looking guy anyway. I mean, I don't look far out and try to figure out where I'm going to be, because, probably going to be where I am now, and I can't usually predict the things that are going to change that. So I tend to go with that. So for instance, in 1991 we moved to Seattle, and this was a big deal because I didn't have a job, so I'd been doing consulting in Ithaca. But Apple consulting was all based on word of mouth, right? That's how you got clients. And I didn't know anyone in Seattle, so that just completely went out the window. And simultaneously, I had nothing to do. Simultaneously, you didn't just get an internet connection in 1991; you had to find one. And so I found a guy named Ralph Sims. And this is back in the days of UUCP, which stands for Unix to Unix copy, and it's a way of getting email. It was literally email would bounce from machine to machine to machine slowly. So this wasn't like today where it just goes boom, 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 boom. It's there, 30 seconds later or a few seconds later sometimes. This was based on dial-up modems. So it could be days, depending on how when people connected, sometimes. And but it wasn't usually days, but it was certainly it wasn't fast. But that was back in the day when, if you had a UCP connection, you would give a connection to someone else on the idea that they would give it to someone else, and you just keep increasing the size of the network. So that's how I got my first internet connection out in Seattle, and so that was that was kind of my intro into the internet world in that part of the country, which 2 years later turned into the first flat rate internet accounts in the world, because Ralph Sims, his machine was Halcyon.com, and he had merged with Ed Morin, who did Northwest Nexus, which is another dial-up provider. And when I went to Ed to see if he knew anyone who might be interested in providing an internet provider for the book, he's like, "That's a problem I'd like to have." And but no one before then had done flat rate internet. You always had to pay by the minute. So so that's it's hard to separate things out, but I think it's that time that we basically threw everything up in the air and moved to Seattle, and what came down was TidBITS, plain and simple.
And you just said we, and I want to make sure that we let folks know that it was you and Tanya,
Yes.
as a team.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Tanya's worked on TidBITS in various forms since the very beginning. I mean, TidBITS was her idea, for goodness sakes. I mean, the whole idea was she wanted to help her colleagues at Cornell who were selling microcomputers and office systems and thus fax machines and copiers, and didn't know as much about the computer side, which is what she was doing. She wanted to help them stay up on the industry. And so, her goal was to do it in PageMaker and, do a little paper newsletter every week. And that lasted 2 weeks. And the HyperCard stack lasted 99, and TidBITS has lasted 1,511 weeks. Or is it 12? It just keeps going up. I have to go look.
Yeah. That's so. But I didn't realize that. I guess in a way, TidBITS started as a paper newsletter.
It didn't start that way. I mean, it was she had this idea, and I was like, "That's a great idea. I'll help you write it. I'll do the writing with you, and but I'm going to put it in HyperCard." So it was simultaneously HyperCard and print for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I don't remember why the one of them, the print one, went away. It may have been too much work for her, or her colleagues may not have been appreciative enough, or who knows. It's just so long ago. Not a detail I can pull out.
Yeah. Understood. One thing that strikes me about TidBITS, always has, and you mentioned in talking about web development that a developer is going to want to push you to the new hotness. And TidBITS never struck me as falling for that. I mean, there have been plenty of things that, happened along the way. If anything, sometimes you guys may have been just a little behind the curve. And I mean that only in the most positive way, because you weren't spinning your wheels and wasting your time running down alleys, trying out all the new stuff. You may have been experimenting with it and to cover it, but you weren't adopting it necessarily as a first adopter.
I think that's true, and there were various. I'm thinking like there were Palm OS based publishing systems, so you could read all your stuff on a Palm. There was some kind of push notification system. I can't quite remember. Obviously, blogging became a big deal. We're like, been doing that for years. TidBITS predates the web. So to some extent, for a lot of this stuff, we really have taken I don't want to say jaded sense. It's more that what has always worked for us is email. And email was where we started. I mean, that first issue of TidBITS went out via email sent from Cornell C, an IBM mainframe that I had an account in at Cornell. And yes, it was a HyperCard stack that was stuffed and bin hexed and whatnot, but it was email. And it took us a while to get our own email, listserv. I mean, our own. It was run for us by a guy named Mark Williamson at Rice University. He just volunteered. He's like, hey, I'd be happy to do this for you. And so then we ran it ourselves in Listar for a while. We've used various other systems, a bunch of homegrown systems. Now it's all homegrown again via, we're using a program called Sendy, which integrates with Amazon Web Services, the Amazon Simple Email Service. And which is great. I mean, it's confusing as all get out. Don't get me wrong. You cannot even begin to look at Amazon Web Services without a developer. I mean, don't even connect to their website without a developer. But we were using SendGrid at first, and SendGrid did a fine job, but it was costing us like $220 a month to send TidBITS. And we switched to Amazon Web Services, and the Simple Email Service is costing us $20 a month. So,
whoa,
yeah, I was like, and that was one of those things where, yes, I had to pay my developer to do this, but it was like, I'm going to pay for this so quickly, at $200 a month difference. So yeah, so I think to get back to your question, we tend to not to adopt the new hotness because most of the new hotnesses cool off. Very few of them stick around. The web stuck around, and we weren't super early on the web. Actually, it's interesting because for a while Tim O'Reilly was talking about how O'Reilly had done the first advertising on the internet because of Global Network Navigator, GNN. And I'm like, well, actually, you didn't. I mean, you can say you had the first advertising on the web, technically, because we didn't have our website until 1996. But we had internet advertising since 1992. So so there's the web was one of those new hotness things that we didn't adopt right away, but then obviously we came to use quite heavily later on. But even then, I mean, I guess I would agree. Yeah, we don't do the way, like, we didn't even do the web really seriously for many years because it was too hard. I mean, you just couldn't really, either you couldn't do the kind of things you wanted to do, or you couldn't afford the kind of systems and connections that you needed to make it possible. This is back in the day when if you had a popular article, it would just take your site down. That it just couldn't. Servers couldn't handle that, and it took us a while to get past that. And even now, I mean, it's not inconceivable. A really, really serious hit could do bad things to our server. That said, we use Cloudflare and content delivery networks and all that kind of stuff now, so it's much less likely.
The second part of our interview with Adam Engst of TidBITS, celebrating TidBITS' 30th year of email publication, will cover things like the evolution of the format and how TidBITS became somewhat unintentionally just part of the overall Apple community and why that's so important, and the difference between TidBITS and some of the other publications we all know and enjoy. Adam also talks about some of the plans for the future, if you can call those plans, and a whole lot more. That's next time on MacVoices. Please join us. So until then, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.